A man stands motionless on a bridge, arrows jutting from his chest like a grotesque pincushion. His enemies watch in horror as he refuses to fall. They don't know it yet, but he's already dead. This is just one of the most epic deaths in human history. And we're about to cover 3 of them that'll make you rethink what it means to go out in a blaze of glory. Number 1. Benke. It's a dark night in 12th century Japan, and a Buddhist monk towers over everyone in the streets of Kyoto. At 6'6", he's a giant for his time, carrying a naginata, a weapon that's part sword, part spear. But his face doesn't carry the peaceful expression you'd expect from a monk seeking enlightenment. No, this guy is hunting. Benke wasn't your average monk. He was a warrior monk, trained in combat and battle-hardened through countless encounters with samurai. And he developed a serious grudge against them. To him, samurai were arrogant, unworthy of their status in society. The world would be better with fewer of them around. So he embarked on a bloody quest to duel and defeat 1,000 samurai, collecting their swords as trophies after each victory. By this particular night, he'd collected 999 blades. One more to go. While walking near Gojo Tenjin Shrine, Benke hears the sound of a flute. The player is a small, thin samurai with a beautiful gilded katana at his waist, the perfect piece to complete the collection. Benke challenges him immediately. The samurai puts away his flute and surprisingly agrees. They walk together to Gojo Bridge and draw their weapons. Full of confidence, Benke rushes in. Despite towering over his opponent, he's swiftly defeated. But instead of taking his life, the samurai just walks away. Benke lies there, shocked. The following days, these unfamiliar feelings twist into anger and frustration. How could he lose to this tiny samurai? He decides to stalk the grounds of Kayamizadera Temple, waiting for another chance. When the samurai appears, Benke challenges him again. He loses. Again. Humiliated, he bows in defeat and tells the samurai he'll abandon his life as a monk and follow him instead. The samurai agrees. His name is Minamoto no Yoshitsun of the legendary Minamoto clan, and Benke has just found his purpose. They become inseparable. Together, they join Yoshitsun's half-brothers in the Genpei War against the powerful Taira clan that had killed Yoshitsun's father when he was just a baby. After 5 years of fighting, the Minamoto clan emerges victorious. Yoshitsun's half-brother Yoritamo becomes shogun. But without a common enemy, jealousy and suspicion soon turn the brothers against each other. Yoshitsun and Benke find themselves on the run from Yoritamo's forces. They eventually find protection under the Fujiwara clan, spending a few years in relative peace. It doesn't last. Yoritamo applies pressure, probably with substantial bribes, and convinces the Fujiwara to betray them. On June 15, 1189, at the Battle of Kuromo River, Yoshitsun and Benke find themselves trapped and outnumbered 5-1. 500 of Fujiwara's men surround their castle position. The forces clash. Benke is a demon on the battlefield, crushing enemies who are on average more than a foot shorter than him. Despite their heroic effort, Yoshitsun's men quickly begin to fall. With just a handful of retainers remaining, Yoshitsun realizes the battle is lost. He turns to Benke and tells him he plans to commit seppuku within the castle. He'll need time to prepare. Benke understands the assignment. He walks to the bridge, the only entrance to the castle, and stands alone against Fujiwara's army. Fujiwara signals a charge. Wave after wave of his men rush Benke. He cuts them down one after another. No man can make it past him. In some stories, it's said he single-handedly slew 300 soldiers on that bridge. Benke stands stoically behind a pile of deceased warriors, beckoning more men to cross. Despite orders, none of Fujiwara's men answer his call. They all know that stepping on the bridge is a death sentence. Fujiwara realizes his men are too afraid to attack head-on. He calls in his archers. They let loose a barrage of arrows that find their mark in Benke's chest. Nothing happens. He doesn't flinch. Another volley follows. Still nothing. Benkei's body becomes a pincushion of arrows, but he remains standing defiantly in their way. Time passes. Both sides stare at each other across the bridge. Nobody dares make the first move. Finally, Fujiwara orders some of his men onto the bridge. They reluctantly advance, creeping closer. Benkei makes no motion to ready himself. When they finally reach the massive monk, they discover that while he was still standing, he was already dead. Knowing he needed to buy his master as much time as possible, Benkei had positioned himself to be supported by his spear, even if he was no longer alive. In his final stand, he showed no pain or emotion while being hit with countless arrows, all to give the illusion that he was ready to fight anyone who dared cross. Because of his final actions, Yi Sunsin had enough time to commit his seppuku ritual properly, maintaining his honor. What a wingman! Number 2, Yi Sunsin. At the end of the 16th century in Korea, there was a strange mix of insane political corruption and relative peace. Korea was a loyal tribute state to China, and the Ming dynasty pretty much left them alone. To the east, the Japanese were busy killing each other in the Sengoku Jidai, so they weren't a problem either. This boring, no-wars way of life led many men to pursue careers as scholars and government officials. It was the best path to power and influence. This created a bloated, corrupt political class and an extremely weak military, led by generals who'd never seen real combat. That combination would cause all kinds of problems. In 1590, Toyotomi Hideyoshi fulfilled his former lord's dreams and reunified Japan, bringing an end to the Sengoku Jidai. For the first time in over 100 years, the Japanese weren't fighting each other. If they weren't busy fighting themselves, who would they fight? Hideyoshi begins sending messengers to Korea, saying he's planning to conquer China and expects Korean help. Or else. Korea couldn't really help Japan conquer China. They were basically China's little brother. Plus, those idiots don't even know how to sail. Right? 1592. Hundreds of Japanese ships appear off the coast of Busan. This is no trading expedition. This is an invasion. Seeing the massive Japanese fleet, two of Korea's top admirals freak out and sink their own ships so they won't have to fight. Just like that, half of Korea's naval fleet is gone. Japanese soldiers land in Busan unopposed and immediately begin conquering forts and cities on their march to Seoul. The Korean military is no match for Hideyoshi's men, all veterans of a 100-year war. Korean casualties are huge. The Japanese are ruthless and leave few survivors. Within 3 weeks, they've marched to and conquered Seoul. A few weeks later, they take Pyongyang and are at China's doorstep. The fall of Korea seems inevitable. When all hope seemed lost, a man determined to defend his homeland rose to the occasion. A man who quite possibly was the greatest admiral to ever live. His name was Yi Sunsin. Yi's story is interesting because unlike most heroes, he wasn't necessarily liked by the elites. They kind of hated him, for all the wrong reasons. Early in his military career, he was so good at inspiring his men and leading them to victory that he made everyone around him look bad. Remember, corruption was rampant. Out of jealousy, a general falsely accused him of deserting in battle. The king believed it. Yi was stripped of his rank, thrown in prison, and tortured. This experience would make most men quit the military altogether. Eventually released, Yi climbed back through the ranks to commanding a small fleet. By the start of the Japanese invasion, despite Koreans being initially terrible at fighting, they had one huge advantage. They'd been dealing with Woku pirates along the coast for years. Because of this, they developed ships called Panoxian and later the Turtle Ship, specifically designed to combat Japanese naval tactics. The Japanese weren't used to fighting at sea, so they stuck to what they knew. Close-range combat, shooting people with rifles, boarding ships, engaging with swords and spears. Their ships were more like transport vessels than battleships. The Panoxian was a floating fortress armed with cannons and built so boarding was impossible. These ships were a huge reason Yi had so much success. They were basically the only advantage the Koreans had. Yi was not a coward like the other admirals. Instead of sinking his ships, he rushed his fleet of 34 ships headfirst toward the Japanese and began attacking them along the coast. His capabilities as a naval commander are obvious from the start. In just a few weeks, using tactics to bait the Japanese into vulnerable positions, he single-handedly sank over 200 Japanese ships with no losses of his own. In battle after battle, he was vastly outnumbered yet sailed away victorious every time. Yi is the sparkling piece of glitter embedded in the turd that is the Korean military. By year's end, he'd sunk 350 Japanese ships. His efforts, along with Chinese reinforcements, allowed the Koreans to drive Japanese soldiers all the way back to Busan. The war entered a stalemate, with the Chinese and Japanese trying to negotiate peace. Things were going well for Yi. But remember those two admirals who sunk their own ships? One of them, named Ji-un, was insanely jealous of Yi's success. So jealous, he started talking trash about Yi to the king every day. When peace talks failed and Hideyoshi began a second invasion in 1597, Ji-un and other government officials framed Yi as a traitor. The king, for the second time in his career, stripped Yi of his rank and sent him back to prison, where he was brutally tortured again. He's set to be executed, but the king has a change of heart. Instead, he sends Yi back to fight as a common soldier, a humiliation worse than death. With Yi out of the picture, Ji-un takes charge of the Korean fleet. As you may have guessed, he was terrible. He drank heavily, made poor decisions, disrespected his men. Many of Yi's commanders refused to fight under such a downgrade. What made things worse was that during the stalemate, the Japanese had actually learned how to fight at sea. Their new ships had cannons. They began using the same strategies Yi had used against them. This all came to a head at the Battle of Chilkanryang, Ji-un's first attempt to attack the Japanese fleet with 200 ships. The entire Korean navy is decimated. Ji-un is last seen being chopped to bits by Japanese soldiers while trying to run away. The king, realizing he may have messed up, reinstates Yi as fleet leader. He takes command of the pathetic remains of the once undefeated Korean navy. He's left with just 13 ships and a few hundred demoralized men. In the following battle, outnumbered 25-1, Yi uses superior strategy to sink 31 of 33 Japanese ships, without losing a single ship of his own. This victory gives Yi time to rebuild his navy. Things still look grim for the Koreans. But the next year, Hideyoshi becomes ill and dies. His last official order is to withdraw the Japanese army from Korea back to Japan. Yi sees this as the time to finally drive the Japanese out for good. He mounts a final offensive against the retreating Japanese forces at the decisive Battle of Noryan. Yi takes his position at the top of his flagship with his son and nephew, and begins beating a war drum to push his allied Korean and Chinese fleet forward. Yi's ship leads the charge. He personally takes out 10 Japanese ships. The Japanese are in full retreat. Yi beats his drum with intensity. Victory is within his grasp after 7 long years. Korea will finally be free. But suddenly, he's hit in his armpit by a Japanese musket ball. He realizes the wound is fatal. He turns to his son and nephew and says the war is at its height. Wear my armor and beat my war drums. Do not announce my death. His son and nephew quickly carry his body below deck. His nephew, dressed in Yi's armor, returns to the admiral's position and resumes beating the drum. Yi's men continue to fight. The Koreans drive the Japanese out of Korea for good. Undefeated in battle, Yi dies below deck listening to the sound of his drum, knowing that his homeland was finally free. Number 3. Salomon. We generally cover stories from more ancient times on this channel, but this story from World War II undeniably belongs on this list. This is the last stand of a dentist turned field medic, who took out 98 Japanese soldiers before falling to his own wounds. Ben Salomon was drafted into the United States Army in 1940, just 3 years after he graduated from USC Dental School. Salomon proved to be a model soldier and showed himself to be very skilled with both rifle and pistol. He was quickly promoted, first to lieutenant and then to captain in 1944, serving as a regimental dental officer of the 105th Infantry Regiment. In June of 1944, Salomon and the 105th were deployed into active combat in Saipan. The fighting in the Pacific was infamously bloody. Casualties on the island were extremely high, with so many soldiers having much more pressing issues than a root canal. Salomon volunteered to replace the 2nd Battalion's field surgeon who had been wounded. By July, both the Americans and the Japanese had suffered heavy casualties. The remaining Japanese troops on the island came to the realization that there was no path to victory. They decided on a final banzai charge, a mission with the sole goal of killing as many American soldiers as possible with no plan of returning. Early in the morning of July 7, 1944, the remaining 4,000 Japanese soldiers began their final attack. His body was ravaged with 76 bullet holes and many bayonet wounds, 24 of which he may have suffered before actually dying. The blood trail on the ground showed that Salomon had repositioned the machine gun multiple times while mortally wounded. Despite saving many lives that day, Salomon was denied the Medal of Honor, due to a rule in the Geneva Convention that no medical officer can bear arms against an enemy. Despite multiple recommendations from generals throughout the years, he remained a footnote in history until 2002, when Salomon was finally posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor from President George W. Bush 58 years later. These 3 warriors, Benke standing dead on a bridge to buy his master time, Yi commanding his fleet with his dying breath to secure his nation's freedom, and Salomon manning a machine gun while bleeding out to save his patients. They all faced the same choice in their final moments: run or stand, surrender or fight. Each chose to make their death mean something. That's what separates an epic death from just dying. It's not about how many enemies you take down or how dramatic your final stand looks. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice when everything's already lost. These men understood that victory isn't always about walking away alive,